Kyle Larson says he wants to embarrass the NASCAR Xfinity Series. Kyle Busch might have picked up some new sponsors for 2025, and the next-gen car has a major problem, and it needs to be solved on the short tracks. What's going on, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to another video. We got some NASCAR and other motorsports stories discussed here today on the channel. Let's go ahead and just jump straight those really quickly. We're first going to take a look at a ton of paint schemes that have been revealed over the course of the last couple of days. Let's go ahead and just jump straight into them. The first paint scheme we're taking a look at is Ryan Ellis's 2025 Southern Elevator scheme that we'll see this weekend at Rockingham. I think the scheme actually looks really good. I do like the colors. I like the black number. I like the white. I like the blue. The colors look solid. Looking forward to see on the racetrack on Saturday. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Ben Rowe's 2025 Zimmerwerk Kubota scheme that we'll see this weekend in Rockingham and I believe a couple other races in 2025. The scheme actually looks solid in my opinion. I do like the different look to the Kubota scheme that we've normally seen. It's a different change than one, and it does look alright. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Todd Gilliland's 2025 Renee scheme that we'll see at Atlanta Motor Speedway in June. This is another Stuart Haas Racing sponsor that is joined up with Front Row Motorsports for 2025. I gotta say, this car actually does look solid. I do think the cars on it do look pretty solid. Looking forward to seeing on the racetrack at Atlanta. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Brandon Jones' 2025 Grandpa Gus Pest Control scheme that we'll see this weekend at Rockingham on Friday. I do like this truck. It does look really solid. I think it's a different looking truck that we've never really seen before like this. I think the colors, the green, the black work really solid on this one. Looking forward to seeing on the racetrack at Rockingham. And the final paint scheme we're taking a look at is Daniel Suarez's 2025 Telcel scheme that we'll see at Mexico City for the first Cup race in Mexico City. I believe it's the first time that Telcel has been a main sponsor for a car in the NASCAR Cup Series. I'm pretty sure I could be wrong on that, but this is a really, really big deal. Obviously, with the Mexico City race coming up, this is a big deal. They're sponsoring Daniel Suarez, and I think the car looks really, really awesome. They're also been associate sponsor for the last couple weeks with Daniel Suarez. I think the car does look good. Looking forward to seeing on the racetrack at Mexico City in June. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Registick. As it was announced this morning that Registick will sponsor Junior Motorsports in select races in 2025. They are going to sponsor Connor Zillich. Zillich will have them at Pocono and also at Watkins Glen. They're going to sponsor Carson Quaffle, I believe, at Atlanta Motor Speedway. And they're also going to sponsor Justin Allgaier for a few races as well. In addition to that, it was confirmed that Connor Mosek will drive the number 9 with the sponsorship at the Charlotte Roval at the end of the year, meaning that the number 9 car will be back for an extra race in 2025. Connor Mosek, of course, full-time in the Craftsman Truck Series and McAnally Hilgeman Racing, has been struggling this year in the Craftsman Truck Series and just hasn't had the pace and speed to be up front on a week-by-week basis. But we know one type of track that Connor Mosek's really good at. It's the road courses. Last year, he drove for Junior Motorsports in a few races on the road courses, and he actually was really, really competitive and had top 5 and top 10 speed throughout the whole entire event. I'm glad to see him back in the sport, and I'm also glad to see that we've got a new sponsor joining up. I think it's really exciting stuff and pretty good to see overall, in my opinion. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the World of Outlaws Late Model Series, as they officially have a new title sponsor for their series going into the 2025 and 2026 seasons. The sponsor is going to be the World of Outlaws Real American Beer Series. Real American Beer is Hulk Hogan's brand. We have seen him in, I believe, 1 or 2 races in the NASCAR Cup Series, I believe at Las Vegas Motor Speedway on Ricky Stenhouse Jr.'s car. And now we're going to be seeing them work in the World of Outlaws as a title for the late model series, considering some of the, I believe Lucas or whatever the other sponsor the World of Outlaws had is no longer sponsoring for 2026. I think it's still a big deal to pick up a new sponsor like Real American Beer, even though it is a controversial sponsor. I still think it's a big deal that the World of Outlaws has been able to pick up a pretty big sponsor for the year. I think it's really exciting stuff and glad to see the World of Outlaws has been able to pick up a new sponsor for the 2025 and also the 2026 seasons. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Kyle Larson. Now, we do know that Kyle Larson has exclusive Prime bottles that have been officially released in certain locations for the 2025 year. And Kyle Larson did confirm yesterday that Prime is now available in multiple new locations. One of them taking place at Talladega, then at Texas Motor Speedway in Fort Worth, and then Kansas City as well. There's going to be a lot of locations that the Prime bottle will be available for you to pick up across the United States. I believe it's also going to be available in other parts of the country, not just at the racetracks, but also in other parts of the country as as well. Prime, of course, owned by KSI and Logan Paul, which is a controversial company in its own right, but I still think it's a big deal that we have a driver like Kyle Larson who's been growing and getting bigger in the sport. I think it's a huge deal to have your own bottle, and I think it's pretty awesome. So nonetheless, I think it's pretty nice to see and pretty exciting that the Prime bottle that Kyle Larson has with his exclusive branding is on there. Pretty exciting stuff overall, in my opinion. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Kyle Larson once again. Now, we've got a lot of Kyle Larson stories to talk about on the channel, but it was reported by Joseph Strigley from TobyChristie.com and Sports Illustrated that Kyle Larson led 687 laps during the Bristol week combined from the Xfinity Series and the Cup Series. That is the most in the same weekend we have seen at a single track. Kyle Larson just flat out dominated this weekend. He led 411 laps in the NASCAR Cup Series race, and he led 276 laps in the NASCAR Xfinity event. I thought it was 277, but I did check that it was 276. Kyle Larson dominated and obliterated the field this weekend. He dominated, led almost every lap. He led more than half the laps, and he ran the whole entire weekend. It's because Kyle Larson is one of the best drivers in Cup at the moment. He also did another stat that not a lot of people brought up. He surpassed 50 national touring wins across all three series. He, of course, has 16 wins in the NASCAR Xfinity Series, 31 wins in Cup, and he's got 4 wins in the Truck Series. I think it's been a big deal to see Larson continue to win races and win a lot of events, and I think by the end of his career, he'll probably have over 100 national touring wins across all 3 series because he's going to run more Xfinity races and probably win them, and he's probably going to run more truck races and win those as well. So I think it's a pretty big deal nonetheless, and glad to see that Larson was able to accomplish a new feat in his career where he's now led a lot more laps. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about 10 races with percentage. As I believe it was reported by the NASCAR Insights account, I believe on Monday, that Kyle Larson, of the last 10 races, where we've seen some drivers lead 75% or more of the laps, there's a very interesting stat that came out. Kyle Larson, in the last 10 races with 75% or more laps, Kyle Larson has had 6 of those races. William Byron only has 1, that being Darlington earlier this year, a couple weeks ago, where William Byron almost led the whole entire event. The other 3 were Martin Truex Jr. All 3 drivers have one thing in common. They've won a lot of races. Martin Truex Jr., in my opinion, is a first ballot Hall of Famer and will likely get into the NASCAR Hall of Fame in the next couple of years. You've obviously got William Byron, who in my opinion is a future Hall of Famer as well. And we also know Kyle Larson is probably going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer, and he's probably going to win almost 50 to 60 races in his NASCAR Cup Series career. But I think it's kind of crazy to see that percentage of races and the amount of people that's really difficult to win a lot of races and have that high of a percentage. So I think it's a really big deal nonetheless for sure. And I think it's pretty cool that Kyle Larson continues to break records and have new numbers like that. I think it's pretty exciting stuff and pretty cool that Larson continues to do this. We don't see Chase Elliott do this or Bubba Wallace do this. Even Kyle Busch nowadays do this. He did that when he drove for Joe Gibbs Racing, who we'll be talking about, of course, in just a little bit. But I think it's pretty exciting and pretty crazy to see that Kyle Larson continues to break records and also continues to be someone who's leading a lot of laps in these races. He's less than 300 laps away from leading 10,000 laps in Cup competition, which I believe only about 25 or 26 drivers have ever done that in NASCAR Cup history, and he's getting close to 15,000 laps combined in all 3 series as well. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Rutledge Wood. As it was reported a couple days ago, but I believe the Nat IMSA account that does a lot of reports in the industry, that Rutledge Wood was announced yesterday that he will compete in 4 races in the Toyota GR Cup Series with LA America in the number 18 machine. I believe his first start will come in a couple weeks from now as well. We all know who Rutledge Wood was. Rutledge Wood was part, of course, of Top Gear America. He also was part of the Speed Channel for many, many years and was part of NASCAR's NBC coverage of someone that would go around towns and kind of show the areas around cities outside of the racetracks. But Rutledge Wood has not been as active in motorsports over the last couple of years. He's been doing some sort of robot show, I'm pretty sure, on Netflix, if I'm not mistaken, and been doing some other shows outside of the motorsports realm as well in recent years. So it's pretty exciting to see that Rutledge Wood is coming back into the motorsports world and actually be doing some racing instead of doing like the reporting and stuff. Look, I like Rutledge Wood. I think Rutledge Wood is not a bad individual like some people say he is, probably, but Rutledge Wood is someone that I respect, and it's pretty cool to see that he is coming back into the motorsports world and doing something a little bit different too. I think I like when people come and do different things and try new things as well, and having someone like Rutledge Wood of his caliber, well, not of his racing calibers, he hasn't done much racing, but I think it's pretty cool that he's coming back and doing some sort of racing in motorsports, in my opinion. I hope he can be successful and do a really good job. And now we're going to head jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Vicente Salas. As it was officially confirmed on Monday morning that Vicente Salas will be making his Xfinity Series debut this weekend at Rockingham Speedway, driving number 45 for Alpha Prime Racing. Now, I believe Vicente Salas does have a few starts scheduled with this organization in 2025. I think he's going to be running a lot of races near the end of the year, but this is going to be his first Xfinity Series start. Now, for those who don't know who Vicente Salas is, Vicente has competed in the NASCAR Euro Series, and he competed in a few races there, and has also competed on iRacing in the Coke Series, and has won a few races in the Coke Series as well. This guy, in my opinion, is a very underrated driver. He made a few starts in the Craftsman Truck Series last year as well, and he believe he drove for Young's Motorsports, and I believe he made a start with Nice Motorsports last year as well, and honestly, he did not do a terrible job with the team. Now, realistically, I don't see Vicente coming in and being a major factor. Alpha Prime Racing, I think, has had some decent speed this year. Brendan Poole's generally had top 20 speed a lot of races. The same thing with Parker Retzlaff as well. The 45 car is a little bit iffy on owner's points, I believe, at the moment right now. But if he can make the field, I think he's got a good chance to do a pretty solid job and maybe get a top 20. But this is still, nonetheless, a really fantastic opportunity for Vicente. And I hope he can do a fantastic and great job this weekend at Rockingham. I'd love to see him get a top 20. The field is very competitive. You got Casey Kane coming out and racing. You've got Catherine Lay, who we'll be talking about here in just a short little bit. But I do think it's pretty exciting to see that Vicente will get the chance and opportunity to race in the NASCAR Xfinity Series. I hope he can do a good job and run really, really well for Alpha Prime Racing this weekend at Rockingham. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Rockingham Speedway once again. As it was officially announced yesterday that Rockingham Speedway for the NASCAR Xfinity Series race has officially been sold out. Now, there are still tickets available for the Truck Series race on Friday night, but I do expect that in the coming days and probably by the time many of you are watching this video, that event will probably end up selling out. This is still a really big deal. Of course, this weekend is the first NASCAR races we have seen at Rockingham since 2013 for the Craftsman Truck Series, which, of course, Kyle Larson won his first national touring event against Joey Logano. And then, of course, is the first Xfinity Series race that has taken place at Rockingham Speedway since 2004. I think this is a major deal because a lot of people like myself have been saying if you want to support and want Rockingham to have the chance and opportunity down the road to get a NASCAR Cup Series date, you need to show up and go to the race. Well, people are paying money and they're going out to Rockingham. Now, obviously, they've got the repay, so we're not sure what the tire wear situation is going to be looking like when we do go there. But I still think it's a massive deal that a lot of people are wanting to come out and watch Xfinity at Rockingham because the Xfinity Series is going to be the star show of the weekend with the Cup Series being off. And I think there's a lot of NASCAR drivers who are going to be there or watching on TV. We know Kyle Busch isn't going to be there this weekend, but he's going to be watching on TV. We know some other drivers are going to be down there. Sammy Smith is running the Truck Series race this weekend along with that. And you've got some drivers from Trucks and Xfinity, I believe, running the ARCA East race as well. But I think it's pretty exciting that the Xfinity race has sold out. I think it's a massive deal for the Series 2. And I think it's great to see that another series, and we continue to see this series continue to grow. Xfinity's been having some good ratings as well, which we're going to talk about here in just a short little bit. But I do think it's cool to see that we're seeing a lot of people going out and tuning in, and I hope the ratings can be good for the weekend when we go to Rockingham, and I'm excited to see that the Xfinity race has sold out for the weekend at Rockingham. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Brian Vickers. Now, many of you probably saw this on social media, but Brian Vickers is officially back on social media. Now, I am not going to get into the whole situation with, what happened with some of the stuff behind the scenes with Brian Vickers, but obviously he said something like getting rid of the old me, which we all kind of know the situation. We're not going to get into that. But it's kind of interesting to see that Brian Vickers is back on social media for the first time in like 6 or 7 years. Now, in the last couple years or so, Brian Vickers was spotted, I believe, at the Daytona 500, I believe 2 years ago or 3 years ago in 2022 or 2023. Brian Vickers had a pretty decent career in NASCAR. He won the Xfinity Series Championship in 2003. He also won 3 NASCAR Cup Series races. He won a very controversial race at Talladega in 2006, turning Dale Jr. and Jimmy Johnson, one of the most unpopular wins in the sport. Then he won at Michigan in 2009 for Red Bull Racing, which, of course, Red Bull has association now with Trackhouse, Shane Van Gisbergen, and Connor Silich. And then, of course, he won the NASCAR Cup race in New Hampshire in 2013 after Tony Stewart ran out of gas at the end of the event, held off a hard-charging Kyle Busch to get that done. Brian Vickers then kind of was in and out of racing, and in 2016 he came back and ran some select races for Stewart-Haas Racing while Tony Stewart was injured, which is kind of crazy considering Tony Stewart and Brian Vickers had beef back in 2011. But I think it's kind of crazy to see that he's back on social media. Now, could we see Brian Vickers back in the sport and doing something in the sport? It is certainly possible with him being away from her. We'll just have to kind of wait and see what happens. But I think it's kind of crazy to see that Brian Vickers is back on social media the way he is. I would love to see him come back and do some racing in a way, but I don't know if he will ever get the chance to come back and race because of some of the stuff that unfortunately happened behind the scenes that I'm not going to get into. But it's certainly very interesting that he is back in the sport in the way that he is, in my opinion. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the viewership in TV ratings from this past weekend. As it was reported by Adam Stern yesterday that a lot of the viewership has been revealed for all the motorsports across the board from this past weekend. Starting with the NASCAR Cup Series race at Bristol Motor Speedway. It scored 2.054 million viewers for the Cup race at Bristol for the Food City 500. It was down nearly 50% from 2024, but remember the Cup Series race from Bristol this year was on FS1, while the Cup Series race last year, which got 3.8 million viewers, was on Main Fox. And also, of course, the Masters were going on at the time, and you had another motorsport that was going on at the same time as well. For a race in a short track event to have over 2 million viewers on cable is honestly not that bad, and it was still the top of the weekend. Moving on to Formula One, which the Bahrain Grand Prix had 1.277 million viewers. I believe that is the most watched Formula One race of the 2025 season in the United States, and I do think some of those F1 races are probably going to get closer to 2 million as the year progresses and goes on. Pretty solid number for Formula One. I think that's up from last year's race as well, but I believe last year's race was on Saturday, I'm pretty sure, so that is still a pretty good number to have nearly 1.3 million people tune in to Formula One. Next, we go to Xfinity. Xfinity for Bristol had 1.001 million viewers. That is now the 9th consecutive race where the NASCAR Xfinity Series had over 1 million viewers for the series, and which I believe is the most since 2017. That's a really, really big deal. Over 1 million people tuning in every single week, even if with a short track race at Bristol. We're kind of getting close to going out of that 1 million range because people are still having a difficult time trying to find the races at this point. But I still think it's a big deal that the Xfinity Series continues to grow. And I think having over 1 million people tune in is still a really, really big deal. And finally, IndyCar at Long Beach. And this got a lot of conversations. According to Adam Stern, the Long Beach Grand Prix had 552,000 viewers. That is up 80% from 2024, which had 307,000. But that race on cable and USA. This race is on national TV. This is a major, major issue. They have lost 2/3 of their audience since the St. Petersburg Grand Prix, which had almost 1.5 million people tune in. They have dropped, they had like 750,000 for the Thermal Club race. And then you had, of course, the Long Beach Grand Prix. The biggest advice I could give to IndyCar and Fox at this point is, one, don't schedule your second biggest race of the year behind the Indy 500 on the same day as the Masters, which the Masters, by the way, got 12 million people tuning into it. And number two as well, don't schedule it up against NASCAR at the same time because less people are going to be inclined to watch Long Beach than they are going to be NASCAR. Even if the Long Beach Grand Prix, in my opinion, was objectively a better race than the NASCAR race, I still think you can't schedule at the same time. You can't just have these conflicts happening every single time. Now, there's only, I believe, 1 or 2 more conflicts in 2025 for Fox, but if you've got the same network, don't schedule it at the same time. That makes no sense to me whatsoever, and it really hurts it. So they need to stop scheduling at the same time. The number they have is just unacceptable and unforgivable, and to have not many people tune into the Long Beach Grand Prix is really unfortunate, and it sucks to see that less people tune in to the events this year for IndyCar. Just terrible. The promotion's been bad, and multiple breaks as well doesn't help anything, but I think Long Beach this year was not very good for the ratings, in my opinion. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Katherine Legge once again. As Katherine Legge has officially revealed her full NASCAR schedule for the remainder of 2025. So she is going to run 5 more NASCAR Cup Series races in the 2025 season as she'll drive the number 78 for Live Fast Motorsports. Her next scheduled start in the NASCAR Cup Series will be at Mexico City in June. Then after that, she will run the Chicago Street Course event. Then she is going to run Sonoma in July going into August. Then she is going to run Watkins Glen in August, and then her final start is going to take place at Richmond in August as well. She also announced around 7 or 8 NASCAR Xfinity Series races for the remainder of the year. She will drive the number 32 car for Jordan Anderson Racing. Her first start will be this weekend in that number 32 machine. Then she is going to run at Talladega in the week after that. Then she's going to run at Texas Motor Speedway in the 32. Then she is going to run Charlotte during that same week. Then she is going to run Nashville. Then she'll run Atlanta Motor Speedway in late June, and her final start will be at Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Beginning with her NASCAR Xfinity Series run, this is certainly an interesting move that she's fully focusing on ovals and trying to perfect her craft there. I think this is the way that she should have done it on the Xfinity Series side, because we all know what happened at Phoenix a couple weeks ago, or about a month or two ago at this point. She made her NASCAR Cup Series debut at Phoenix Raceway. She was originally going to do the race at Circuit of the Americas, but the deal had unfortunately fallen through for that to happen. But she probably should have just started in Xfinity doing all the ovals, and her first start should have been on the Cup side at a road course, which she is running only one oval start on the Cup Series this year, that being at Richmond, which she does have prior experience there in the Xfinity Series back in 2018, so she does have experience. She unfortunately kind of cost Dale Jr. a shot to win the race that he had entered, but she did run that event. I think that her running in this series is really a big deal because we haven't seen a lot of female drivers have a lot of success in NASCAR. I mean, Danica Patrick really struggled in the Cup Series, the last driver to really make multiple starts in Cup competition, the last female driver for Catherine Lake to make starts in there and at least have some decent success. Well, Danica wasn't the most successful, but we saw Catherine Lake be the first female driver to make starts in Cup since her, and now she'll get to make more starts and opportunities. And it's not like she's running in a fast car. She's running in one of the slowest cars in the field. I realistically think that Catherine Lake is going to struggle in the Xfinity Series a little bit, but I think maybe we'll see some gradual improvement. Instead of running, like 35th or 40th every week, or how many cars are allowed in Xfinity, I think she will gradually improve as time progresses and goes on. And I hope she can do a really, really good job. I want to see her have a lot of success and be very, very competitive, because I want to see her have an opportunity to carve out a NASCAR career. I know she wants to take this seriously and do the best as she can. So we'll see how she ends up doing, but I'm glad to see that she's focusing mostly on the Cup side, running in the road courses, and then Xfinity focusing on the ovals. I don't think she'll be completely out to lunch at some of these races. I think especially with the caliber of competition being stronger in Cup than it is in Xfinity right now, I do think that you're going to see her struggle in Cup a little bit and maybe do a little better in Xfinity, though again, she's doing a lot of ovals, which I do question that a bit, but I also think she does have a chance and opportunity to be successful. We haven't seen a lot of female drivers have success. Haley Deegan had been trying to move her way up into the sport, and she really struggled completely in NASCAR. Tony Breidinger, she's trying to have a lot of success, and it just hasn't worked out for her in trucks at this point. We're seeing people like Isabel Robasso and Jade Abadisian do their best they can, and Kaylee Bryson as well, who all had success in their forms of racing, so we'll see what they all can do, but I hope that Catherine Lake can do a really good job in the races that she runs in NASCAR this year. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Tony Stewart. Now, this past week at the NHRA event at Las Vegas Motor Speedway, Tony Stewart, of course, is competing in the Top Fuel event. And Tony Stewart, for the first time in his NHRA career, was able to win a Top Fuel event. This means that Tony Stewart has won a lot of massive events in motorsports. He has, of course, won 3 NASCAR Cup Series championships and 49 races in the Cup Series, including winning 2 Brickyard 400s in 2005 and 2007. Tony Stewart's also won the IndyCar Championship in 1996 or 1997, and he's also won a lot of other forms of racing as well, and has been also very competitive in IMSA as well. Now, Tony Stewart this past week was asked questions in regards to certain things, racing against his wife, Leah Pruitt, was also asked about maybe doing the Indy 500 once again. He was asked, I believe, by Bob Pockers and many people in the industry this weekend, was asked about maybe having the opportunity to run the Indy 500 once again. And Tony Stewart said currently at the moment that he's not planning to run the Indy 500 in the not-so-distant future. He says that, yeah, it's been a long, because he says, one, it has been 25 years since the last time I competed in the Indianapolis 500, which is true. The last time Tony Stewart did compete in the Indianapolis 500 was in 2001 in the number 33 car for Chip Ganassi Racing. That was when he did the double that year, and Tony Stewart was actually very competitive. He led a bunch of laps in the race. I think he ended up finishing 6th in that Indy 500, and then he went to the Coke 600 later that night, had to start at the rear of the field because he missed driver intros, but he did an exceptional and a very, very good job in that car and almost won the Coke 600 that year. I think it'd be really cool if Tony Stewart got the chance and opportunity to maybe run the Indy 500. But again, it's been 25 years. The cars have changed. Yes, they've had the same chassis now for nearly 2 decades at this point. But I think that Tony Stewart would struggle a bit. One, Tony Stewart is 53 and will turn 54 next month. And Indy cars are much different than the NHRA. Now, Tony Stewart does look very, very healthy. He's lost a lot of weight as well, which is really, really good. But I do think that Tony Stewart would struggle at least a little bit for sure. And I don't think Tony Stewart would be super fast and super, super competitive, unfortunately. Like, I do want to see Tony Stewart do good, don't get me wrong. I just don't see Tony Stewart going and running the NHRA and having the most success that I think he really, really would want. But I think it'd be fun for him to come back and do it. I would love to see him do some Indy stuff and get involved in IndyCar in some way, shape, or form. Maybe instead of going and doing racing, maybe getting involved in the commentary side of things. He's done some work with Fox Sports in the past, so why not do that? Because we're seeing Kyle Larson do it, and we think Larson's going to be really competitive this year at the Indy 500, but you never know how competitive someone is truly going to be. But again, Tony Stewart will be 54, and if he does run in 2026, he'd be around 55 years old. I know AJ Foyt did it till he was in his mid-50s. I think AJ Foyt was almost 60 when he retired from doing it, so you never know. AJ may be just a number for Tony Stewart at this point. But again, things are a lot different nowadays than they used to be. So I'm not sure if Tony Stewart would go down there. He'd be really, really competitive. So we'll have to see if Tony Stewart ever wants to do it again, but it sounds like he's not interested right now, which I completely understand from his perspective. It seems like Tony won't run the Indy 500, which I don't think he's going to do it anytime soon. I'd love to see like Kyle Busch come and do it at some point, maybe Chase Elliott or even maybe Bubba Wallace or Ross Chastain. That'd be cool. Maybe we'll see Haley Deegan down the road. So maybe she'll run the Indy 500 or SVG does it. I'd love to see Shane Van Gisbergen do it as well. But it seems like right now Tony Stewart's not fully interested, which I don't completely blame him in my opinion. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the Xfinity Series. Now, it was reported by Adam Stern on late Monday afternoon that Clutch Sports is deepening its presence in racing with helping find a new premier sponsor for the Xfinity Series going in 2026. It continues on by being reported later in the evening that they are seeking $10 million annually for rights fees to replace Xfinity. Now, for those who do not know what Clutch Sports is, Clutch Sports is a company and a management brand that is officially associated. I believe Rich Paul owns that company, and Rich Paul is a big agent of LeBron James, who of course competes in the NBA, who's getting close to the end of his NBA career at this point. But they also have been deepening their stuff in motorsports, as I believe they have signed Joseph Newgarden, and they've also been associated with Will Power as well, who is still looking for an IndyCar contract for the 2026 year. It's unknown if Will Power is going to be back with Team Penske after this year, as Dave Malukas has been heavily rumored to be maybe replacing him for the 2026 season. But obviously the big talking point is the Xfinity Series. We know at the end of 2025 that it's very, very likely that Xfinity, in which we all know is confirmed, that Xfinity will not be the premier sponsor of the secondary series in the 2026 season. The big reason for that is because they're going to be focusing on becoming a premier partner. They're still going to be a premier partner in NASCAR, and they're not backing out of being in the sport. But instead of focusing on being with the Xfinity Series, being the top dog, and being the premier partner for that, they're going to be doing more of the premier partnership on the NASCAR Cup side of things and being a premier partner across the sport as a whole. Another big reason why that is happening is because Xfinity is in the Comcast brand, and Comcast is no longer associated with the Xfinity Series anymore because they had NBC, and NBC has been doing some branching off for their other companies like USA, but they're no longer working with that series at the moment. Instead, they're going to be, of course, Nexstar runs the CW, and Xfinity Series is on the CW currently at the moment, which they've had issues getting people to tune in, but it's still a big deal. So now the big question is, what is going to be the title sponsor? Well, for what I hear and understand, Busch is the favorite currently at the moment to be the title sponsor for the secondary series, which I would love to see Busch be that title for the secondary series because it just feels old school. We've seen Craftsman come back in recent years and be the title sponsor for the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series. It was Camping World from 2009, and then of course it was some of those other brands. I can't remember the other stuff that they had, like Gander RV Outdoors, I think was the sponsor that they had for title for a couple years, and now they brought Craftsman back over the last couple of years or so. To me, I would love to see Busch come back and be the title sponsor, and I think that's what is likely going to be the title sponsor for the secondary series in 2026. It just feels old school. Busch was the title sponsor, I believe, from around 1984 to 1985 up until the end of 2007. Then they went to Nationwide from 2008 to 2014, and then Xfinity came in for 2015, and they'll end that in 2025. Plus, Busch does have a premier partnership in the sport currently at the moment, as as one of the title sponsors, which Busch, Xfinity, Coca-Cola, which I think Coca-Cola would be cool for them to come in, but I think most likely Busch is going to be that title for the secondary series. To me, I think it's a really, really big deal nonetheless, and I think it's going to be kind of interesting to see what that said title sponsor is going to be for the 2026 season. We'll find it out as time progresses and goes on, but like I said, I do think that most likely Busch is going to be the title sponsor for the secondary series. We'll find about that here soon in the not-so-distant future. And now we're going to jump on to the first of three major stories in today's episode as we're talking about short track racing in the next-gen era. Now, there has been a lot of conversation around NASCAR and the short track racing in the next-gen era over the course of the last couple weeks, but we've been seeing a rising increase of talk about it over the last week or so. A big reason for that is because what happened during the NASCAR Cup Series race at Bristol Motor Speedway. Many of you probably saw the race and probably saw one of the worst races we've probably seen in Bristol Motorsports history. Kyle Larson flat out dominated and led 411 laps. And the reason a lot of people really pissed off and frustrated is we saw all the tire issues that we saw on Saturday before the NASCAR Cup Series race took place. And then we go to Sunday and there's rubber on the track. There's a lot of it being laid down. And then the racing at that point just did not become very good at all, and it was really difficult and very tough to pass. Auto Racing Analytics, aka Graham, put out an interesting article, put out an interesting post on Twitter after the race had concluded. And when you look at this post, everybody is so close together. Everyone is running the same speed. Everybody is going the same speed. Ryan Blaney and Kyle Larson running the same speed. Had any of those guys gotten out front instead of Kyle Larson, there's a very good chance they win the race. Had Ryan Blaney had enough gas to make it to the checkered flag, Ryan Blaney would have won the race because there was no tire fall whatsoever during the event. We have seen a lot of issues with this next-gen car on the short tracks, and I think there's a lot of major issues that need to be fixed with this next-gen car 100%. And I think there's a lot that does need to change because right now, I have a bad feeling that Bristol Motor Speedway may lose a date down the road. I would not even be surprised going into 2026 if you do see one less Bristol date on the schedule. Because I think Bristol, there's issues with that as well. I think there's multiple things that do need to be talked about in truth. Number one, the next-gen car is terrible on short tracks right now. It is really, really bad on short tracks. Or it's at most very just not good. We have not seen generally a lot of good short track races. There's been maybe one or two good short track races. The Iowa race last year I thought was actually really, really good. But then also the Martinsville Fall race was really good. But do you all remember what happened during that Martinsville race? The manipulation happened with all the Chevrolet and Toyota teams. Everyone forgets how great that race was because there's a lot of tire fall off in the event. But also, the teams have figured this out as well. And I think we're even seeing some of the dirty air effects coming into play on the intermediates too. If it was just Bristol Motor Speedway, I would be probably saying nothing else at this point. Say, oh, just this was a Bristol issue. We've got issues, which I'll get to Bristol here in just a second. But the next-gen car does have a lot of problems, and it needs to be resolved. So what are some of the solutions that I think could be here to fix the problems? Number one, I think these cars need horsepower. I think you got to get more horsepower in these cars. Right now, they're running 670 horsepower. You need to get that up to 750 or even 800 horsepower at this point. The engine manufacturers have said it publicly that they are willing to add horsepower, and they can add horsepower if they need to. So that's one thing that needs to happen because we saw really good racing with the Gen 6 car. Guess what? They had 750 horsepower, and the racing on the short tracks during that era was really, really good on pretty much every track. We have not seen generally a great Martinsville race in about 4 or 5 years outside of maybe the fall race last year. The racing in Martinsville has not been good. And even we're seeing these issues at tracks like Darlington as well. I think adding more horsepower to the car makes sense. Denny Hamlin said it last week, we need more horsepower. It would cause a lot more of the tire wear to come into play, and tires will fall off a lot more quicker as well. Also, the tires, way too big. Get them shortened from 18 inches down to like 15 inches. You don't have to really change the body too much of the car to get them down a little bit. If you shorten the body a little bit, I think that could help with the racing product too. And then finally, the last thing that I would say, and getting to that, is you got to do some, maybe have different types of packages perhaps, or just make a new car at this point. But the problem is NASCAR has had the same car only for 4 years. And I don't think NASCAR wants to get rid of this car 4 years into it. Because we probably would be a couple years. We probably have this next-gen car for a few years. And it keeps saying the reason they can't add any more horsepower is because they're waiting for a new manufacturer to come in. And while we know it's very likely that Dodge is coming back to the Truck Series in 2026, we still need to be looking at trying to fix this issues. There's still so many problems with this next-gen car in a lot of different areas. The super speedway racing isn't great by any stretch of the imagination. I think a lot of the blame goes to the car, but I think some of the blame also needs to go to Bristol Motor Speedway. I think majority of it, again, to the car, say maybe 75%, but I think at least 20 to 30% has to go to the track. There was no race this weekend that was good at Bristol. Bristol's not this top-level track that everyone makes it out to be anymore, unfortunately. Since they've done the reconfiguration in 2007, I think the racing generally has not been that great at the track, and I think there's a lot of things that need to be fixed with this car, but also the track needs to change. I think there needs to be some changes happening to the track. Think about this. Many years ago, before the reconfiguration happened in 2007 when they did progressive banking, the racing was always really good there. You had 160,000 people showing up. Now, you might get half the people showing up, which is still about 80,000 showing up to a race is really, really good, but you're not getting numbers you used to have back in the day. So I think Bristol needs to be blamed for some of the issues as well. At the end of the day, there's a lot of changes that need to be with this car, and I really hope NASCAR is working toward it because they're frustrating to me because these short track races are becoming unwatchable generally, and they're not the most exciting events. It's cool seeing Kyle Larson dominate, but I think a lot of people want to see better racing. So I hope things can change with the car soon, and the racing can get better very, very soon as well. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Kyle Busch. Now, many of you have probably seen this on social media over the course of the last day or so, but it looks like Kyle Busch might have picked up a couple new sponsors for the 2025 season. There's been some leaked images that have been surfacing. I believe NAS Carson on Twitter posted a couple of these as well. The first one that I noticed is 7-Eleven, and the other sponsor looks like will be NicoKick.com. Let's first begin with 7-Eleven. We have seen a lot of the gas station brands be associated with Rich Schultz Racing over the course of the last couple of years. Casey's General Store sponsored Kyle Busch in 2023, I believe in Michigan when he unfortunately spun out. I believe also sponsored him in a couple races in 2024 as well. I think they almost sponsored him, I'm pretty sure, when he almost won the NASCAR Cup race at Kansas last year. And also we've seen Quick Trip sponsor him for a few races since joining up with Richard Schultz Racing. And now it looks like 7-Eleven is coming in to sponsor. Now 7-Eleven has not been really involved in NASCAR for quite some time, actually. They were involved back in the 1980s with the Wood Brothers when they sponsored Kyle Petty when he joined over there, I believe, in 1985 or 1986. They were on his car, I believe, when he won the Coca-Cola 600 in 1987, also when he won the Richmond race in 1986. They also were associated with Kenny Bernstein's team in the King Racing organization as well. But they have not been really associated with NASCAR that much in recent years. But I think it's exciting to see that Kyle Busch has a new sponsor of 7-Eleven coming in and being back in the sport in some way, shape, or form. Now, Nico Kick, I believe that is going to be a super speedway style package, so I'm thinking that they're going to sponsor Kyle Busch potentially at Talladega or maybe at Daytona at the end of the year. But Nico Kick, I believe, is a nicotine brand. I think it's part of some of the Zone branding, I'm pretty sure. So it's a new sponsor technically, but it's not officially a new sponsor. But the big one is 7-Eleven. It has been so long since we've seen 7-Eleven come in. But we've been seeing a lot of old school or even new sponsors come in recent years. We've got Amazon Prime that has shown up to sponsor Kyle Larson during this year's Coke 600, Indy 500. They're also going to sponsor Chase Elliott in a couple races this year. I believe they're going to sponsor him at Kansas, the All-Star race, and I believe the Texas Motor Speedway as well. And I believe also during the Coke 600 too, I'm pretty sure. We've seen Denny Hamlin pick up Progressive, which is sponsoring him for a majority remainder of races in 2025. We've also seen other companies come in and sponsor Kyle Busch. That one company that sponsored him, I believe, at Homestead, I'm pretty sure, and some of the other sponsors as well. We've seen sponsor Kyle Busch. We've seen, of course, WeatherTech and Red Bull come in and sponsor Shane Van Gisbergen. But we've seen Kyle Busch also pick up a lot of new sponsors because we all go back many years ago when Kyle Busch was trying to find a job for the 2023 season because Kyle Busch, we all know M&M's, was going to be leaving Joe Gibbs Racing at the end of the 2022 season. They were ending their deal there, and we know that's one of the reasons why Kyle Busch did end up leaving Joe Gibbs Racing at the end of 2022 was because that he didn't want Joe Gibbs Racing paying out of his own pocket and Joe Gibbs paying out of his own pocket. He wanted to be able to bring in new sponsors to the table, and then Kyle Busch picked up a lot of sponsors over at Richard Schultz Racing because when you think about Joe Gibbs Racing, they want to go after all of the full season sponsors while you have a team like RCR that can kind of piece together multiple different sponsors. Alsco Uniforms, Bennett Transportation, Cheddar's, for example, Zone. Trici, and other companies that have associated with Kyle Busch, like even when Rowdy Energy sponsored for a race or two down that time. But I think it's a big deal for Kyle Busch. Now, obviously, there's a lot of questions about whether Kyle Busch is going to stay with Rich Choles Racing in the 2026 season. But seeing Kyle Busch pick up new sponsors, I think that's going to help convince Kyle Busch to at least stick around with RCR, at least for the near future, because I know at the beginning of the year that I had predicted that Kyle Busch more than likely was going to leave Richard Choles Racing at the end of 2025. But what great options are really out there for Kyle Busch past this year? I mean, some mentioned Spire Motorsports, and I think Spire Motorsports would definitely make a lot of sense. He drives for them in the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series right now, and he's been having a lot of success with that team in trucks. Plus, he's a consultant for their Truck Series program, so maybe he goes down and runs the Truck Series full-time, but I just don't see that happening at this time. Now, maybe he goes to their Cup program, takes over to 7, because we know that RCR had tried to convince Rodney Choles to come over to that team and work with them. But you look at also RCR as well. The team has been better this year than they were last year. Outside of Homestead and Vegas, where Kyle Busch had speed before he had the tire issues, he's generally had more speed this year. RCR looks a lot more competitive. Austin Dillon's looked better this year than he did last year. I think Richard Boswell coming on and working with Austin Dillon's been really helping Dillon a little bit this year. And I think RCR generally is a little bit faster at the moment. So I very much think that Kyle Busch is going to stay with Rich Choles Racing for the 2026 season. Now, I think that there is a chance that after 2026, we see Kyle Busch go on and try something else or move on to a different team for the 2027 season. But I don't think, I know people talk about maybe him retiring at the end of the year, but I don't see Kyle Busch retiring at the end of this year. I think he's going to stay around for at least a couple years. I know he wants to compete against his son Brexton in the Craftsman Truck Series down the road, which I believe that is still the plan currently at the moment, because once Brexton turns 16, he can run on the shorter ovals, which Brexton's only about 5 years away from being eligible to do that at this point, but it won't be till 2031 till he's eligible. So I think that's something that we're going to have to wait on for sure. But I think Kyle Busch, nonetheless, it's big that he wants to probably stay with the team, because Spire would be a good option, and 2311 would be a great option, but I don't think 2311's open. I thought maybe Joe Gibbs Racing because of Denny Hamlin, but Hamlin's been so good this year that I think Hamlin isn't going to retire at the end of the year. He's probably going to stick around. So I think as of right now, Kyle Busch sticks around and stays at Rich Choles Racing at least for the foreseeable future and stays with the team going forward. And now we're going to head on to the final major story of today's episode as we're talking about Kyle Larson once again. Now, we have talked about Kyle Larson a lot on this channel for a lot of reasons, because Kyle Larson obviously dominated the weekend, leading almost every single lap in the NASCAR Xfinity Series race, and then going to the Cup Series race and almost leading every single lap of the event as well. He became the first driver to lead over 400 laps in back-to-back races at Bristol since Bobby Allison did that in 1972. Now, Kyle Larson was on the Happy Harvick podcast a couple days ago on Monday, and he spoke about racing in the NASCAR Xfinity Series. And Kyle Larson had a very blunt but a very interesting quote. Kyle Larson said on the Happy Harvick podcast, he says, "In Xfinity, I do get motivated, and this is going to come across like very cocky, but I want to embarrass them honestly. I want to embarrass NASCAR a little bit because they just don't like Cup Series guys run anymore. And the kids, they probably think they're in a good spot. And they don't know where the bar is really at. So I like to go run those Xfinity races and get 10-second leads to let them realize that they've got a lot of room to improve. And I think that's only better for our sport. When those young guys can't compete with Cup guys, they're better suited for the Cup Series once they get there. Yes, I want to smash the field when I run Xfinity. So that's motivating for me for sure." When Kyle Larson said those comments, there was a lot of people that were really frustrated with what Kyle Larson said. Because a lot of people say, well, Kyle Larson's in the best equipment. He races the best stuff. But honestly, Kyle Larson is not wrong with what he said. Is he a little bit arrogant? Probably. Sure, but he said it counts cocky and arrogant. But when you dominate a race like Kyle Larson did in both the Cup race and the Xfinity Series, you've honestly earned the right to be a little bit cocky and also have earned the right to be a little bit arrogant. And to me, I don't blame Larson for saying this. And honestly, it makes the series better. Drivers have said in the past when they've raced in the NASCAR Xfinity Series against Cup Series guys, they actually do learn to get a lot better. Think about this. Drivers in the series, I even saw Ryan Ellis comment about that, as I believe I also saw some other drivers in not some of the best equipment saying the same thing. They learned to get a lot better. I mean, look at the Xfinity race, for example, at Homestead. Kyle Larson dominated that event. He almost could have won the race by 20 seconds. Instead, a late race restart came out, and Justin Allgaier ended up winning. The only guy that had any chance against Larson at Bristol was Justin Allgaier at any point in that race, and Justin Allgaier was a former Cup driver at one point. Look at the truck race at Homestead, for example. Corey Heim went up against Kyle Larson in that event and was the only guy that really might be anything for Kyle Larson. Corey Heim dominated. Many people like myself say that Corey Heim should be in the NASCAR Cup Series field currently at this moment. And you think about the caliber of competition. When you had a lot of the guys coming in and running select races, you had a lot more of those really talented drivers in the late 2000s. Chase Elliott came in. There was a lot of Cup guys running. Guess what? Chase Elliott won the championship, and look at Chase Elliott now. Chase Elliott is a Cup champion. He's won nearly 20 races. Bubba Wallace was a very solid driver in Xfinity competition. Came in around 2017, 2018. He's gotten a couple wins and could honestly have a shot of having a really good season. In recent years, we've seen not as many of those top caliber Rookie of the Year drivers. I think about, because the 2010-2014 group, guys like Kyle Larson and Chase Elliott and those guys, they had really good competition their years. Ricky Stenhouse Jr. finished top 20 points. He's won multiple races. So we've seen a lot of that. You think about the newer crop of drivers since around 2018 to 2019 when they really limited the amount of guys running the series. 2019 Rookie of the Year was some of those guys like Ryan Preece. Ryan Preece now in really good competition, really good equipment now, but Ryan Preece and Hemrick, they kind of struggled. Hemrick's no longer in the Cup Series currently at the moment. 2020, Tyler Reddick was the best of the rookies, so Reddick's been competitive, but Cole Custer won the Rookie of the Year. He won Xfinity Championship. He has not looked good in Cup since coming up. 2021 Rookie of the Year, Chase Briscoe. Chase Briscoe, guess what? He's only won a couple Cup Series races. He's been in good Cup. He hasn't been the best equipment there, but he's only had one or two really good seasons at this point, and he's only won 2 Cup Series races at this particular point. The Rookie of the Year in 2022, Austin Center, has got 2 wins at this point, and hasn't really done much with Penske. 2023, Ty Gibbs. Ty Gibbs won the Xfinity Championship. He comes to Cup. He's looked good, but still is looking for his first career Cup Series victory. And then 2024, last year's Rookie of the Year honors. You had some of those guys, and they haven't looked that great, if I'm going to be honest. And you think about the Rookie of the Year this year. Shane Van Gisbergen and Riley Herbst going for it. SUG's good at road courses, but he struggled in Cup this year. And Riley Herbst has looked out to lunch this season. And Carson Osbar, he's been good, the Rookie of the Year last year. He's been good, but he wasn't really that great this year, so he's been amazing this year so far. I think about the rookies, and I think that you need some of those Cup guys in there. Now, I don't want to see bushwhacking come back full force. There's some are saying we need bushwhacking because of lack of respect in the series. I don't want to see bushwhacking come back in on a full scale like we saw in the 2000s. It made those races unwatchable, but I think NASCAR honestly does have a perfect limit right now. I think 5 races being the limit, or maybe going up to 6 or 7 would be the limit I go to, but I think they've got a pretty solid balance. They're not allowed to run the playoff races, so they're not affecting the championship in any way, shape, or form. So I really don't see a massive issue with the couple times seeing Cup guys run down in the lower series. Can it sometimes be boring? Sure, 100%. But I think right now that the limit they have is honestly understandable, and I don't think they need to limit it anymore because I think you need Cup guys in the series. And I think Larson having those blunt comments, it can come off as cocky, but honestly, Kyle Larson's not wrong for what he said, and I actually agree with Larson quite a bit, but I don't want to see full bushwhacking come back in. That being said, I think the limit is solid currently at the moment, and I think they've got a decent limit, in my opinion, in regards to it, because you've got this Cup Series right now where guys are dominating, and coming in and running a few series is not the end of the world, in my opinion. Think about the prior week, too, with Darlington. You have 3 Cup guys in there. Christopher Bell, Ross Chastain, and Chase Elliott. 3 of the final 4 from 2022. Brandon Jones won that race. Justin Allgaier dominated that race. A couple guys, in my opinion, that are pretty good. So I think that what Larson said was blunt, but it's not wrong, in my opinion. So, that is going to today's Law NASCAR News and Motorsports News episode. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe to the channel, notifications on, so if I win a video, it does go live on my channel. Follow me Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and support me on Patreon as well. Let's go some more of that and comment your thoughts below on today's episode. What are your thoughts about Larson's comments? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And what are your thoughts about Kyle Busch likely picking up some new sponsors? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. We will have the Xfinity Series race picks dropping later today from Rockingham. And then tomorrow on the channel, we're probably going to be doing schedule predictions for 2026. And if there's a lot of news that does break, there should be a news video dropping along with the truck review. If not, you might be seeing a silly season update drop on Friday as well. Saturday, we're going to have the Xfinity Series race review from that, and also reactions to Xfinity qualifying as well. And then, of course, on Sunday, we are going to have the 2026 NASCAR Cup Silly Season predictions, and we should have a news video dropping on Monday. We got content coming up. People like Haley Deegan, Shane Van Gisbergen, Collins, Kurt Busch, Kyle Busch, Bubba Wallace, Ross Chastain, Kyle Larson, Chase Elliott, Red Bull, among other things. Cleese Farm, Matt Benedetto, all the good stuff as we head to Talladega next week. So anyway, and Chandler Smith too, and Eric Almirola. So anyways, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's episode, and I'll see you guys next time for more great, awesome NASCAR content and other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.